My name is Dan Daly, and welcome to episode 20 of the Basketball Soapbox. In this one, I'll be going over the Donovan Mitchell trade, how that impacts the Cavs, how I think the Knicks dodged a bullet in this one, and how Utah plays a part in this, but also how it impacts the Eastern Conference, because I think that's very important. They're messing up my rankings, the Cleveland Cavaliers, so thank you. As the slow NBA offseason, I thought it was safe to put a ranking out, and it's not. So, thank you. But moving on, we look at other NBA news according to injuries to two big teams in the Eastern Conference, and as well as the WNBA playoffs, because I feel like there's two good series going on, and a good playoffs that's going on in the WNBA, and I'll get into that. A'ja Wilson and Breanna Stewart playing well, Candace Parker playing at an all-time level. Ashley's aging is just it needs to be discussed. As we get into our first topic, we look at the Donovan Mitchell trade. Donovan Mitchell was traded to the Cleveland Cavaliers a couple days ago for Colin Sexton, Lauri Markkanen, 3 first-round picks in the 25th, 27th, and 29th draft, and 2 pick swaps in 26 to 28. Utah instantly signed Colin Sexton to a 4-year, $72 million extension. He was looking for his money, and Cleveland found a partner for him to get his money. So Colin Sexton's paid. But looking at Cleveland, this is a big move for Cleveland. A small market team that has been crushed historically in the 70s. I think they got to the 1976 Eastern Conference Finals randomly. But they have been crushed historically, especially by Michael Jordan and the Bulls. LeBron comes to save them, brings them a championship in 2016, and this is probably their best team since the early 90s. They haven't won a playoff series without LeBron James since 1993, I believe. And that was when they beat, I think I have it written down here. They beat the Nets 3-2, but then lost to the Bulls in 6. And the year prior, they went to the Eastern Conference Finals where they lost in 6 to the Bulls, Michael Jordan's epic series. So they haven't won a playoff series in nearly 20 years. 30 years without LeBron James. 30 years without LeBron James. That's insane. But this is probably their best team. Donovan Mitchell has 4 years left on his deal, but has a 4th-year player option. So he's tied up. He's 26 years old, an all-star, proven guy that has advanced rounds and has been a big-time scorer. I think he's like the 4th in all-time playoff scoring. You look at Darius Garland, who they signed to a max extension, rookie extension. He's an all-star, 20-7 guy, 28 guy, who basically needed someone to help him last season, especially scoring-wise, and Donovan Mitchell fits that bill. This team still has Jarrett Allen, who they got in a trade from the Brooklyn Nets, which is crazy because, the Nets could have had Jarrett Allen instead of DeAndre Jordan. That's a whole nother discussion for another day. But he's a guy that gets you 16 and 10 with nearly 2 blocks a game, great defense, efficient around the hoop, and gets you 16 points a game, which is awesome. And then followed up by Evan Mobley, who's only 20 years old. People are worried that he can't sign a max extension due to whatever poison pill contract or whatever how it goes, whether you can only have a rookie extension guy on your team, but they traded for one as well. So they're not going to be able to offer him the 5-year max when his contract is up, I think, in the year before. So when the extensions happen, he can't sign a 5-year deal. It's basically going to be a wink-wink, and then in the offseason, they're going to try to sign him to a 5-year deal. I don't see why he would want to leave this core unless they're just not getting it done. But this is great for Cleveland to have this young nucleus and to add without losing much. Lauri Markkanen was playing small forward at 7 footer, next to Mobley and Allen. And they traded him and added Donovan Mitchell, who they desperately needed. And they didn't give up Garland. They didn't give up Jarrett Allen. They didn't give up Evan Mobley, Karis LeVert, Kevin Love, Cedi Osman, all these guys that have been on Cleveland. They basically kept their core intact and added Donovan Mitchell. That's a big upgrade for a young team that has added an all-star and has 2 all-stars on the team and potentially a great big man in Evan Mobley, especially on the defensive side of the ball. This just improves Cleveland tremendously, a team that's great defensively. I know people saw them stumble last year. Jarrett Allen fractured his finger, I believe, or his thumb, or whatever the case may be, and couldn't play the last couple months of the season, and then rushed back to get into the play-in game where they got smashed by the Hawks. And people looked at that as a casualty. But if he was there, they were still a top 5 defense in the league. And that's what Kevin Love, Darius, Garland, and all these other guys that aren't really known for defensive end of the ball. But to sit there and still be top 5, and they were 20th in offense, and add Donovan Mitchell, a guy who gets you 25 a game career-wise, that's big time for this team that was desperately needing another scorer, another ball handler, and another guy that can go get you a bucket. He's going to get hot at times. He's going to be streaky at times, especially, but in playoff matchups, when you go into different arenas, you go into Brooklyn, potentially, you go into Milwaukee, you go into Philly, you go into Toronto, you go into Boston, you're going to need somebody that can get you buckets. Donovan Mitchell has done that in his career. And to be paired with Darius Garland, who's a promising young player who's going to be a continual all-star, it's just awesome to see Cleveland do this. And when you look at their bench, they still have Kevin Love, Karis LeVert, Cedi Osman, Ricky Rubio, Robin Lopez, who they added, and Isaac Okoro, who they basically just need to be a spot-up shooter. They basically just need him to knock down some buckets. That's it. If he's able to knock down his shots, they're in pretty good position, team-wise, and especially with the 3-and-D guy that Okoro could potentially be, if he is able to knock down his shot, this team is going to be scary. And they're already scary. I have them as a top 4 seed in the Eastern Conference. I think Miami's going to take a step back. I think Toronto's going to be right there, kind of battling positioning. I think Atlanta's still going to be lower tier. Who else is there? And we just don't know what's happening with Brooklyn. Everyone's picking them Brooklyn to win the East and all this other stuff. And it's like, we still don't know what's going to be of this team. Kyrie Irving's getting in the best shape of his life. Kevin Durant's going to come back. We already know what he brings to the table. But everything centers around Ben Simmons. If he's able to come back and play at a high level, especially defensively and playmaking for this team surrounded by scoring and shooters, you still have Joe Harris there. You still have Steph Curry there. So to add that with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, that's potentially going to be an awesome team, but that's on paper. We still don't know what's happening with that. But do we know with Cleveland, they're a top 5 defense, and they just got better adding an all-star in Donovan Mitchell to do the Cleveland Cavaliers. I don't know what else you can ask for. I really don't know what else you can ask for. Moving on, and I think this is no one's talking about this. JB Bickerstaff has been an interim coach in Houston, interim coach in Memphis, and never really got to get his head coaching stamp of approval. And this is probably his best roster that he's ever had. And to get this opportunity for him, I think is just cool. He's Bernie Bickerstaff's son. He's been a NBA lifer as an executive and coach and stuff like that. So to see JB Bickerstaff get this opportunity with a young team in Cleveland, growing like this and seeing the potential of this team, I don't see a downside to this. They have built this perfectly, constructed this perfectly. To give up those draft picks, realizing we have a young core intact, let's try to go for it now. Let's try to add an all-star and continue to build this and not lose anything bench-wise. Lauri Markkanen's a 7-footer that was playing for them and went to Utah, and he's a 15-point-per-game scorer, but just for the Cavs, they needed an extra layer of scoring and a boost of scoring, and Donovan Mitchell brings that for them. Also giving up Colin Sexton. I think he only played 11 games for them. Colin Sexton's a nice player, but just didn't fit with Cleveland, and we just wonder if Darius Garland was going to be able to grow next to a Colin Sexton. And we saw last season when Colin Sexton wasn't there, Darius Garland was able to take his game to the next level and the Cavs to the next level and give them some type of hope offensively. But now adding Donovan Mitchell, I'm not saying they're going to make the Eastern Conference Finals. Maybe they get to the second round this year, but the potential growth of this team, as their core is so young, Darius Garland being 23, Jared Allen 24, and Evan Mobley 20, as I touched on, to see the potential growth of this with Donovan Mitchell getting older and still young, still healthy, he can potentially be the second best player, third best player, depending on the development of Evan Mobley. That's crazy to think about, and especially looking at Donovan Mitchell's past, playing in Utah, not really having much outside of Rudy Gobert defensively, who raised their game defensively. They had Bogdanovich and Jordan Clarkson and Mike Conley, nice players, but nobody he can really rely on to elevate their games to take them over the top. So now to look here and have a Darius Garland next to you who you know can get you a 20-point game, facilitate the offense, and not everything has to lean on you consistently all the time. This is going to be great for Cleveland. This is going to be great for Cleveland. I love this for Cleveland, how they took a chance, realized the situation with the Knicks wasn't going as well as everyone thought, and snuck in the back door and made this trade happen and boosted their chances. And let's get something frank here. They were a playing team because of injury last year, so they're probably middle of the road team. In the NBA, you don't want to be at the end or the middle of the road. You either want to be really, really bad or up in the top four, giving yourself a chance to advance and get to Eastern Conference Finals, potentially a championship. And I feel like they did that with this move. You want to give yourself a puncher's chance to get better. And that's what Cleveland did with this trade. They're not at the bottom anymore. They're not they're not messing in the middle. They give themselves a puncher's chance to get to the Eastern Conference Finals, potentially a finals at some point with this young core developing. And I think that's awesome for Cleveland. A small market team that has been terrible without LeBron James and has been since the 90s and stuff like that. So to look at what they have done the past couple of years, built this core, built this team, and continuously getting better, I just love this move for Cleveland. I think it's a great move, and especially for Donovan Mitchell to get out there and everyone thinking it was going to be New York. Turns out it's Cleveland. And he's taking a chance on Cleveland. He has 3 years left on his deal, but to play with that core, he was excited to see Darius Garland, Jarrett Allen, Evan Mobley, to see some type of potential there and to be excited about that is good for Donovan Mitchell, it's good for the NBA, it's good for Cleveland, and that's a win for them. Now, moving on and looking at this from the Knicks perspective, people have been killing the Knicks for not getting Donovan Mitchell. And a lot of people, such as Stephen A. Smith, just want the Knicks to get a star. And I've said this to people, especially Celtics fans, you don't want to just do stuff roster-wise just to do something, just to change something. And looking at the details of what was offered and what was proposed or what was rumored, you don't want to give up too much, similar to what they did nearly a decade earlier with Carmelo Anthony, where you really gave up a lot of depth of your team to bring in a star around that much. Of course, they had Chauncey Billups included in that deal. Of course, the Knicks had that 50-win season with Mike Woodson, and then it went downhill from there. But looking at this, Utah wanted R.J. Barrett, Quentin Grimes, 3 first-round picks, and the Knicks countered with Isaiah Quigley and a top 5 protected pick, I believe. Oh, no. Utah wanted R.J. Barrett, Quentin Grimes, 3 first-round picks, and 1 was top 5 protected. But when the Knicks countered with Isaiah Quigley because they didn't want to give up Quentin Grimes, Utah wanted all 3 picks unprotected, and New York was hesitant to do that. They didn't want to include Quentin Grimes in that trade, which people are saying he only averaged 6 points and 2 rebounds. What are you doing? Make that trade. And it was also reported that the Knicks offered R.J. Barrett, Mitchell Robinson, and Obi Toppin 3 unprotected first-round picks, and Utah rejected. In result, Mitchell Robinson signed a 4-year, $60 million deal after that was rejected. And R.J. Barrett recently signed a 4-year, $120 million deal extension. And reportedly that angered Danny Ainge in Utah. And basically they're saying that's what made him trade for the Cavs, trade Donovan Mitchell to the Cavs. And everyone's kind of blowing up at Danny Ainge. But let's look at this from the Knicks perspective. If you would have gave up R.J. Barrett, Mitchell Robinson, Obi Toppin, and all those picks, what is Donovan Mitchell coming there to play with? Jalen Brunson, who's your offseason acquisition. Julius Randle, who had a down year after all third-team NBA season 2 years prior. And Donovan Mitchell with no Mitchell Robinson, no Obi Toppin, and no picks. How does your team get better? At that point, it's a desperation move. You're going to try to get rid of Randle, but you might get bad contracts, really, really bad contracts for multiple players, and you don't want that. So how do you move anything? How do you create some type of opportunity there? I don't see, and I said this to people, I don't see Donovan Mitchell moving the needle for the Knicks in that situation. He moves it for the Cavs. That's why he was traded to the Cavs. That's why the Cavs put all those picks in there and pick swaps and stuff like that in there. For the Knicks, if they would have made that move, it would have gutted the Knicks. The Knicks probably would have been a play-in team anyway. How does your team get better from there, especially with that miniature defense, that miniature backcourt, not a really good defense, and not much around these guys? How do you get better? How do you improve this team, especially with Randle's contract? You just signed Julius Randle to a big-time contract. How do you get better moving forward? And I just wouldn't have seen it for the Knicks. It would have just been mediocre, 42, 44 win team, out in the first round, out in the play-in, not much hope. So the Knicks, I don't think they lost in this one. I think they missed out on a star, yes. But in the long term, it's like, hey, you guys didn't kill yourselves in this trade like you've done before. You guys didn't handicap yourselves, putting yourselves in a corner, trading for Donovan Mitchell, giving up assets, young players, et cetera, et cetera. They signed R.J. Barrett. They signed Mitchell Robinson. They signed Jalen Brunson. And now you're just looking at this team. Well, what do they need to do? They need to figure out how to get rid of Julius Randle, unfortunately. And Julius Randle had a nice All-NBA third team the past couple years, but now it's like it's kind of ran its course where it's like he's upset at New York. New York's sick of him. Everyone's criticizing Julius Randle, and everyone's trying to figure out ways to move him. His contract, I believe, is making nearly $30 million a year over the next 4 years. So it's like, who wants to pay Julius Randle, a guy who's a 29 guy, showed that he can pass and facilitate? Are you going to run your offense through Julius Randle? Is he going to be a number 2 on a team, whatever the case may be? That's what they need to find out. That's what they need to look for. And I don't think the Knicks are going to lose in that situation. They need to figure out ways, hey, how we can keep our picks, how we can look for another guy, another star that's going to potentially be there. They made pitches to Giannis Antetokounmpo, I believe, in recent before he re-upped with the Bucks and won a championship. So they're going to be looking for another star there. The Knicks cannot do pass moves like they've done in the past, getting Jamal Crawford, getting Eddie Curry, getting Jerome James from Seattle that one year when he had a great playoffs, getting Allen Houston, signing these guys to big contracts. Jared Jeffries comes to mind, Stephon Marbury's, all these guys, Tracy McGrady, Tim Thomas, all these guys, numerous throughout their franchise history who they had big deals on, and they underperformed in New York for one reason or the other. They can't continue to do that, and I think they saved themselves from making a mistake and getting fleeced by Danny Ainge and really, really protecting themselves from a bad trade, I think, in my opinion. And yeah, you would have gained a star. Yeah, you would have got some star power in the Garden, but what wins you would have had? What culture you would have been building with that? And you would have really been hoping for Donovan Mitchell to recruit to your team. And it's like, how many people still want to go to New York? It's been 20 years. My whole lifetime. Who have the Knicks brought in besides Carmelo Anthony? I can't think of anybody. Phil Jackson's probably the most notable name in their entire franchise history outside Patrick Ewing, of course, and all the New York legends that they had in the past 30 years. John Starks, Anthony Mason, Charles Oakley, guys like that. But in terms of name recognition, Phil Jackson's probably the biggest name they brought in. And he doesn't play on the court. He doesn't add to wins, and he didn't during his tenure there. So I think the Knicks are all right. I think they need to continue to find suitors for Randle if they can trade him. Hopefully just try to inject some life into Randle so he can be that All-NBA guy. And then you have something there, potentially with R.J. Barrett growing, Obi Toppin continue to see his development, and Jalen Brunson can continue to provide some scoring, probably the best scoring guard they had since Stephon Marbury. And really just try to figure it out that way. Don't shoot yourself in the foot making bad deals because you're desperate. The league knows you're desperate. You're the New York Knicks. They know you're desperate. But make the smart decision. Use those draft picks with Randle and get somebody in there. There's going to be a disgruntled star somewhere in the NBA. There always is. every time. People have suggested SGA, and I'm just trying to think of other players out there who they can target. I can't even think of anybody right now off the top of my head. Maybe De'Aaron Fox in a couple of years, or maybe sheesh, I don't know. But there's other guys out there that they can be targeting out there. Now, moving on to Utah, people have criticized Danny Ainge on this move and saying, why didn't you go get RJ Barrett, who you know is going to be at least a good, decent player that you can try to build around or at least see take a flyer on. And why not Mitchell Robinson, Obi Toppin, Quentin Grimes, or Isaiah Quigley, and all those picks from the Knicks bet on their future of losing. But when you're bringing in guys that are on rookie deals coming into the season, you have to figure out how to extend them. Is RJ Barrett worth $30 million? I don't know. I don't believe so. I don't think he's there. Maybe 20. I'll feel more comfortable paying him 20 than 30. So would you want to really sit there and, as a rebuilding team, pay RJ Barrett all this money, pay Mitchell Robinson potentially all that money? No, I wouldn't want to do that. So that's why they took the flyer on Lauri Markkanen. That's why they extended Colin Sexton to 4 years, $72 million. That's roughly $18 million a year. That's a movable contract, a friendly contract in this league. And when you think about what happened to Chicago, which I'll talk about later, you're looking at potential trades there and trying to get a pick for him. You're trying to flip Colin Sexton. You're maybe potentially trying to flip Lauri Markkanen. You're trying to flip all these other guys in terms of Mike Conley, Jordan Clarkson, Malik Beasley, who they still have, and Brogdon Bogdanovic, and maybe I'm messing him up with the other guy that plays in Atlanta, but his last name has been Donovich. Those are guys those are 4 or 5 guys that can get you first round picks continuously. And Colin Sexton and Lauri Markkanen, they're probably going to look to flip those guys at some point during the season. So Colin Sexton, go ahead and get 20 points, boost your value, and see if you can get traded after December 15th, because I believe that's what Utah is going to be trying to do. And you're just looking at what Utah has done this offseason, getting all those picks for Rudy Gobert, pick swaps, young players in they got all these players from Minnesota that they flipped. They already flipped Patrick Beverley to LA. And you're just looking at this team. It's like, hey, Danny Ainge, when you go into a rebuild, you tear the house down. People were saying that he was going to build around Donovan Mitchell. When you go into a rebuild mode, you tear the house down. You don't leave anything there. That's what happened in the Boston Celtics. They sat there and they slowly let Ray Allen slip away. They reluctantly traded KG and Paul Pierce. And then Rondo was kind of like that last guy that was hanging on, and then they finally moved him. When you're rebuilding, tear it down all the way to the bottom. Unless you have a young budding star, tear it down all the way to the bottom. And after evaluating, hey, we're not going to win with Rudy Gobert. We're not going to win with Donovan Mitchell. Tear it all the way down. And to be able to get all these pick swaps, and potentially all these guys that can be moved for first rounders during the NBA season. Malik Beasley's a good shooter. Jordan Clarkson's a guy that can get hot off the bench. Mike Conley can be a solid point guard for some team out there, or a backup, even though at his salary. But a team in a contender mode would be willing to move contracts to get Mike Conley there to help them. Bogdanovic is a good scorer. So there's still moves for Utah to make. And I noticed what they did was add other teams' draft picks and maybe looking at those as picks, as Walker Kessler and Ajabaji, I believe his name is, the guy out of Kansas there from the draft. Looking at other teams' picks and basically saying, hey, that's a draft pick. So I think the move that the NBA is going to start doing, and maybe Danny Ainge kind of set the trend of this, is looking at other teams' draft picks and saying, hey, that's our draft pick now. We're going to make moves for that. We're going to take a flyer on those young players and see what we got there. That's another story. But Utah has really decided to tear the house down, really rebuild, not take any, and especially not taking on any long-term bad contracts. I think that was major. You see teams do that all the time. They take a bad contract and then try to flip them. Maybe in this day and age, it's a little bit easier to flip. We've seen John Wall get moved, Russell Westbrook, Al Horford get moved on big money deals. So it's not impossible. But to see Danny Ainge basically craft this and say, hey, we're going to bring in our guys. They brought in Will Hardy, the head coach now, the Utah Jazz. They traded Donovan Mitchell. They traded Rudy Gobert. Hey, we're going to start from scratch. We're going to be able to draft our guys, use our young core, and figure out how to build forward to the process rather than having all these hanger-ons and then trying to figure out guys to trade for who probably are not as tradable as people may seem. But for Utah, this is a great rebuild option for them. And I think I understand. I get why people are upset saying, hey, why didn't you build around R.J. Barrett, a guy who's slowly building his game but not there yet for Utah. He's not a clear-cut gem for Utah in this position. Well, how many games are you winning with R.J. Barrett? Are you building around R.J. Barrett? The Knicks aren't even building around R.J. Barrett. So it's like, well, now they are because he's still there, but we saw that they were willing to move on from him in order to get Donovan Mitchell, get an upgrade at his spot. So are the Knicks building around him? No. And the Knicks aren't building around him. Why would Utah build around him? I just don't understand that. I just don't think that's a good move. So I understand where Danny Ainge could have made the move, been in a little better position to build forward, adding guys. He could have traded those guys. But when you see guys come in on big money contracts that you're going to have to tie down to a young team, a rebuilding team that aren't in your future plans, it didn't make sense to take the Knicks deal. And I completely understand why he took the Cavs deal, which would probably be just a better situation for them, especially with those young guys, all those picks, the pick swaps. Those are tradable. He can still trade those, maybe try to entice a guy future down the road. The picks were for 29, 27, and 25, I believe. So it's like you can move those picks down the road and figure out what to do with that. Maybe that's how you entice a player to come there into Utah and say, hey, we can build around you. We got the cap room. We got the assets. We can do this. And maybe look at a potential guy that wants to go to Utah rather than struggling in free agency, rather than probably missing in the draft at times that can potentially happen. So I think this is a good, smart move for Utah. As we move on from the Donovan Mitchell trade, we move into other NBA news. The Lonzo Ball injury. He's going to miss the start of the regular season due to a meniscus tear that was suffered in January of last season. So for that, they said it was going to be 6 to 8 weeks, and it's the summertime now, heading into training camp potentially, and everyone's kind of like, huh? And he's still having these lingering issues. They brought him to various knee specialists to figure out what the best course of action is, and it's just unfortunate because Lonzo Ball, especially last year before he got hurt, the Chicago Bulls were humming on, I believe they were in the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. His lockdown defense with Caruso, his playmaking and ability to catch and shoot off the dribble and improve his shooting, which was a struggle point earlier on in his career, changed his shot. And you just see this guy that really worked on his game, seemed to have found a place in Chicago. And then as soon as it started, it just goes downhill. And unfortunately, he's just not able to stay healthy at this point in time. And it's like, damn, man, this guy's a really good player. And I hated him in Laker colors. I hated that because I really liked him coming out of UCLA. But going into the Lakers, I was like, damn, I don't want to see this kid do well there with the big baller brand and all that stuff. Remember the bad shoes and stuff like that, breaking out of his shoe and things like that nature. To go to New Orleans, where I thought it would have been a really, really, really great fit. They didn't end up keeping him. They ended up getting Devontae Graham and all these other guys. And it was like, you should have just kept Lonzo Ball for your team. You probably would have been in a better position. But he didn't like the vibe down there and what they had going on and the organization basically in New Orleans, and went to Chicago and seemed to find a home, find a place with Billy Donovan down there and Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan, good vets that can score and basically want to score, take the pressure off of him. And he was able to fit in there nicely with those guys. And now to be derailed at the start of the season for Chicago, that's a big loss for them. That's why they probably signed Goran Dragic as insurance. He's an older guard, a guy that's shown that he can be a streaky scorer, but he can still help Chicago. But to lose Lonzo Ball to start the season for Chicago is a very, 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 very big detriment to them, especially with the Cleveland Cavaliers trading for Donovan Mitchell. it really hurts their chances in the playoffs and really moves them down towards the ladder in the Eastern Conference. And it just sucks because you want to see Lonzo Ball do good. He's really been working hard to change his game, improve his game, and to see this happen at this point in time, it's just like, damn, man, this is a young kid who's really doing good, and to just basically have this lingering knee issue. Hopefully he's able to figure it out. It's a meniscus. We've seen people come back early from that. We've seen it take some time to come back from that. So it just depends on him and his body, and hopefully he's able to come back. Moving into other injuries, Danilo Gallinari for the Celtics, who they just recently signed, playing in the FIFA World Cup against Georgia, injured his left knee, and it looked bad when it happened. Like, they had video clips of it and a picture of the still shot, and it looked like his knee broke inward, and everyone was like, oh God, that looked really, really bad. But to sit there and now look at, first, the Italian team reported, hey, it's just a meniscus tear. And everyone's like, okay, that's a 3-month process. He can come back from that and be all right. It was later reported. It looked way worse than that. It looked way worse than that, than anything, than what they were saying. They were like, he got a meniscus tear? He got lucky. So after that, after a couple more tests, they're like, oh no, he tore his ACL. So he's out for the season for the Boston Celtics, basically just out for the Boston Celtics. And that sucks because you're just looking for a guy that was, especially in the playoffs last year, you were looking for a guy that can really, really shoot the ball and really help this team. Grant Williams improved in that situation. Danilo Gallinari, but sometimes you just need an extra veteran on the floor, some guy that's been in big games, had playoff success, been able to score in the playoffs, and to lose that potentially on the back end of the bench, it doesn't kill the Celtics, but it is nice to have that guy there. And to lose that guy, Danilo Gallinari, I remember him with the Clippers having really good seasons. And then, of course, everyone remembers Denver and New York and being younger. But I remember him being in those Clipper situations and playing really well. He played okay in Atlanta. To lose that for the Celtics sucks, and now they're looking at options there, and people are saying they're going to bring in Sam Hauser. Hopefully he can fulfill that void of shooting, and they've been really high on him since last season. They signed him, I believe, to a 3-year deal this year in the offseason. Struggled in Summer League, but let's see if he gets some rest in training camp and preseason, how that transpires. People are saying, hey, go get Carmelo Anthony, who I think at this point in time, when people are sitting there cringing at Carmelo Anthony, and it's like, you're not asking Carmelo Anthony to be a number 1 guy or a number 2 guy, number 3 guy, number 4 guy even. You're just asking Carmelo Anthony to come in and knock down shots. He's been able to do that in Portland. He was able to do that even in LA, even though they struggled. Danilo Gallinari, last time I checked, is not a great defender. Carmelo Anthony's not a great defender, but Carmelo later in his career has been able to shoot the ball really, really well. So why not take a chance on that and see what that brings in? I'm not even against going with Sam Hauser, getting those reps in and seeing what he can do for the Celtics on that end. But yeah, it just sucks. Danilo Gallinari, I thought he was going to be really good here. He's on a 2-year deal, but just to miss the whole season is just the struggle point here. And it really just sucks for the Celtics and Italy and their FIBA World Cup chase. And for him, especially looking for an opportunity where you've been in a couple situations where you knew you weren't going to win. The Celtics just made the finals. They're going to be a top-tier team in the Eastern Conference, and to sit there and basically get hurt playing FIBA basketball, just trying to stay sharp, help your country out, to come up with that injury, ACL tear, it's not like an ankle sprain or anything like that, to miss the whole season. Basically, June, you're going to be returning potentially when the Celtics are in the finals. Fingers crossed. But, yeah, he's basically out the whole season, and basically the season for him at least is a wash. The Celtics experience for him is a wash right now in his first year. So that sucks. And injuries like that, you've seen that with Chicago, with what they're dealing with Lonzo Ball, with his meniscus tear and just not being able to get right. Now to see Danilo Gallinari, 2 guys who I thought were going to have solid seasons coming in now to just get injured and basically be struggling, limping in basically in Lonzo Ball's case and basically out for the season, Danilo Gallinari. That sucks. Our next topic topic is the WNBA playoffs. The WNBA playoffs have been going on, and we had a great battle in the first 2 games of the Seattle Storm versus the Las Vegas Aces. Seattle took the first game 76-73. Jewel Lloyd, who's been big time for the Seattle Storm there, knocked down a big shot late to push the lead to basically give them the win. And Breanna Stewart played really well. Ainge Wilson struggled, only had 2 points in the second half there, and that was a real struggling point there for Las Vegas, who were in the game and just basically needed Ainge Wilson to step up in that first game. And it was like, damn, she didn't just have it. She just didn't have it. Was struggling with the double teams that Seattle was throwing at her. Stu Bird doing a good job diving in, and they're basically just forcing her to make quick decisions, even though she didn't turn over the ball a lot. It really slowed down Las Vegas, and they really struggled with Ainge Wilson's performance. Tina Charles has been in the league forever for the WNBA. I believe she was Connecticut Sun and New York Liberty and all these other teams, and now she's with Seattle with Breanna Stewart on the front line, and they basically just controlled the game early on, and it's like, damn, that's going to be tough to beat. I didn't think Las Vegas would have lost that first game. I was thinking Las Vegas was going to handle that. Ainge Wilson and Kelsey Plum and Chelsea Gray, I thought they were going to handle that. That was not the case in the first game. In the second game, however, Ainge Wilson came out and was very aggressive, very decisive in her moves, and finished with 33-13, and really had a really good game. Jewel Lloyd struggled, and the Aces were able to win 78-73, and these games have been close. And Breanna Stewart and Ainge Wilson basically 1-2 in MVP candidacy. Really had a great game. Breanna Stewart had 32-7 to Ainge Wilson's 33-13, and this is just a battle between 2 bigs, 2 forwards, and Seattle's not really putting Breanna Stewart defensively on Ainge Wilson, and Ainge Wilson finally decided, hey, I'm the best player in the league right now. I'm going to take advantage of this, and I'm going to score. I'm not going to be afraid to score. I'm going to be aggressive. And Kelsey Plum and Chelsea Gray were able to tip in with 18 and 19 apiece. To see those 2 battling, Ainge Wilson and Breanna Stewart, is just great for the WNBA. It was awesome to see basically this duel. You would call this a duel in the WNBA, and it just looks great. Ainge Wilson looks fantastic out there in the post. She was making great moves, spinning baseline and hook shots, just making great, quick, decisive moves in the post. Breanna Stewart is being great. But yes, this was a big time. Jewel Lloyd struggled. Sue Bird struggled in this game, in the second game for them. Ainge Wilson, the series is tied 1-1. I believe they're going to Seattle now. This is basically almost Sue Bird's last ride in the WNBA. I believe this is her last season. And for them to be battling the Las Vegas Aces, who have been on a tear all season, number 1, Becky Hammond, first Coach of the Year. Ainge Wilson already been named Defensive Player of the Year. I'm not sure they gave her the MVP edge yet. I believe she will win it. But to have these 2 big-time rivals going at it, I think they have I can't remember, a bunch of first-round picks between these 2 teams. It's just awesome to see the WNBA thrive right now, and it's really good basketball. I think people should really check it out if you haven't, and really check it out because there's really good basketball. If you love the game of basketball, you can watch the WNBA. Don't listen to all this hoopla or whatever it is, and they're women, they can't dunk and all that stuff. This is really good games. As we move on to the Connecticut Sun versus the Chicago Sky, the Chicago Sky dropped the first game after a big game from Candace Parker. The Connecticut Sun just had great scoring across the board, balanced scoring. De'Arna Bonner had 15, Alyssa Thomas with 12, Jokel Jones with 12, and Brianna Jones off the bench with 12. Candace Parker had 19 points, 18 rebounds, 5 assists, and 6 blocks. I believe she's the first WNBA player with 15, 5 and 5 with that stat line, but to exceed that at age 36, still playing well, being CP3 in the WNBA and getting better with age. She won Defensive Player of the Year last year, won a championship with the Chicago Sky with Kalia Cooper as the MVP. To see her still put up masterful performances, great performances, and still play defense at a high level. She's 36 in the WNBA. People are usually not playing that long. Maybe they hang her on. Maybe there's some random person hanging on like that. But to see her continue to play this high level You just look at the Sparks' demise right now. They basically picked Derek Fisher over her in this new direction they were trying to go, and basically saying Candace Parker was a head case. And it's like, that's not the case. That doesn't look like the case right now. And I think the Sparks gambled, and they lost somebody who was very important to their franchise. And they are not the same team anymore. They are definitely not the same team anymore. And to see the success of the Chicago Sky over the past couple seasons, I believe Elena Delle Donne was there and scoring big time for them early on, but just never had that team to get over the top. And to basically lose the Sparks to lose Candace Parker and the Chicago Sky to gain Candace Parker, come back home and put in this work consistently and play at a high level, even despite the loss, is very impressive on Candace Parker's part. And kudos to her. She's one of the greats all time in the WNBA. And yeah, she's just playing great. Even in the second game, they bounced back with an 85-77 win. Candace Parker had 22 and 7, had more balanced scoring. All their starters were in the score. All their starters were in double figures. And it's just an ode to Candace Parker. And Candace Parker, kudos to her, man. And just to continue to see her go at it every day. Basically have a tap on Chicago, basically willing them to win and not wanting them to lose. And much better play from Courtney Vandersloot and Kalia Cooper and all those players for Chicago. But Candace Parker is the catalyst for that. She is the catalyst for that, and it's awesome to see women's sports like this, because you're seeing women into older age. Candace Parker, 36, Serena Williams, 40. You're seeing these masterful performances, these great performances from players of all age and really putting in some work, especially in the WNBA there. I believe game 4 is today on Sunday. I'm filming this really early in the morning. So I would try to touch base on that going into my next episode. Maybe the series is already gone by the time I do my next episode. But I've been following this, and this is really good. Just to see Candace Parker play at a high level, see the battle between A'ja Wilson and Breanna Stewart, seeing Sue Bird in her last hurrah, Candace Parker in her up in age, Tina Charles playing really well still with Seattle. I didn't think that would work, honestly, when they brought her in, but she seemed to be handling the boards and still being a beast on the boards and scoring inside. But yeah, just check out WNBA, man. Give it a chance if you're not watching it, but trust me, Candace Parker, A'ja Wilson, Breanna Stewart, Sue Bird, Jewel Lloyd, Chelsea Gray, Kelsey Plum, and among others, check it out. And that will do it for episode 20 of the Basketball Soapbox. Follow me on TikTok, Instagram, Spotify. Check out the podcast. Check me out on Facebook, the Basketball Soapbox. Like, comment, subscribe. And I'll be back probably with more WNBA news and more any other NBA developments. I'm not sure I'm going to continue to do my NBA rankings. I might do those in smaller videos. Maybe not break down each video, but have multiple teams in each video and basically just try to break it up a little bit so it's a little bit more out there and I can get it out before any other news happens. That would be the ideal situation of doing that. And any other news, I just moved, so things have been hectic, but hopefully getting into be able to provide more content, a little bit more easier, a little bit more feasible for me and for you, and try to get you as much things as I can, as much content as I can, maybe some 2K stuff, and just more content, maybe so have some more guests on and have more interactions with you, the fans, and anyone out there who wants to give this channel a chance. And thank you for joining me for episode 20. Episode 21 will be out soon.